The Sheriff's Christmas Bride by Zoe Matthews. The train whistle pierced the frigid Montana air as Melissa Hughes gathered her skirts and peered anxiously out the frost-edged window. The landscape outside was a pristine blanket of white, stretching endlessly toward snow-capped mountains. It was December 20th, 1885, and after 5 days of travel from Boston, she had finally reached Timber Ridge. "Timber Ridge Station. 10-minute stop," the conductor called, moving through the car. Melissa drew a breath. This was it. The moment she'd meet Sheriff Anthony Wilson, her future husband. Their correspondence over the past 6 months had been proper, but promising. A respectable widower of 40 who'd written that he sought a woman of intelligence and good character to share in the building of this growing town. She smoothed her navy blue traveling dress and adjusted her matching bonnet in the small hand mirror from her reticule. At 26, Melissa had resigned herself to spinsterhood back east, where the war had claimed so many young men. But here was her chance at a family, at a purpose beyond serving as a companion to elderly aunts or teaching other people's children. As the train shuddered to a halt, Melissa collected her carpet bag and the small trunk containing her worldly possessions. The porter helped her descend to the wooden platform, where the bitter cold immediately stung her cheeks. Timber Ridge was smaller than she'd imagined. There was a single main street lined with wooden buildings, most decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for Christmas. She glanced around uncertainly. Sheriff Wilson had promised to meet her train. Perhaps he was delayed by his duties. Melissa moved toward a bench outside the station house, setting down her trunk. "Miss Hughes," a deep voice spoke from behind her. Melissa turned, but instead of the middle-aged man whose description she'd memorized, she found herself facing a tall stranger with broad shoulders and a serious expression. He couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair and a clean-shaven face weathered by the elements. Most notably, he wore a sheriff's badge on his sheepskin coat. "Yes, I'm Melissa Hughes," she replied cautiously. The man removed his hat, revealing a shock of dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Caleb Reynolds. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Something in his tone sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the December air. "Sheriff Wilson?" she began. "I'm sorry to tell you that Sheriff Wilson died in a shootout with cattle rustlers 8 days ago," he said, his voice gentle but direct. Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. "Anthony is dead?" The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and she gripped the bench for support. "Perhaps we should step inside," Sheriff Reynolds suggested, reaching for her trunk. Minutes later, seated on a hard wooden chair in the station house with a cup of weak tea, Melissa struggled to make sense of her situation. Sheriff Wilson, her intended husband, was dead. She was 2,000 miles from home, with barely enough money for a meal, let alone a return ticket to Boston. "The town council asked me to meet you and explain," Sheriff Reynolds was saying, standing uncomfortably by the pot-bellied stove. "They weren't sure what arrangements to make." "I see," Melissa replied faintly, though she didn't see at all. "And you're the new sheriff?" "Temporarily." His mouth formed a grim line. "I was passing through, tracking a bounty when Wilson was killed. The mayor practically begged me to pin on the badge until spring, when the territorial governor sends someone permanent." "You're a bounty hunter," she stated flatly. "Was," he corrected. "I've agreed to stay through the winter." Melissa set down her teacup with a decisive click. "Well, Sheriff Reynolds, thank you for meeting me, but I should find accommodations for tonight and consider my options." "That's another problem, Miss Hughes." He shifted his weight, looking even more uncomfortable. "Timber Ridge's only hotel is full to bursting. There are families coming in from outlying ranches for Christmas, plus the regular stagecoach travelers. There's not a spare room to be had in town." "Surely someone would take in a stranded woman at Christmas time?" "Ordinarily, yes, but the tensions between the cattle ranchers and the sheep men have divided the town something fierce. Half the households aren't even speaking to the other half, and no one wants to take sides by helping a stranger associated with Sheriff Wilson. He made some enemies trying to keep the peace." Melissa fought back tears of frustration. "So I'm to sleep in a snowbank for Christmas?" Sheriff Reynolds cleared his throat, and Melissa could tell that he was trying to stop a grin from forming because of her dramatic statement. There is one option, though it's hardly proper. The jail has a spare cell. It's clean, with a decent bunk. It's warm, and you'd have privacy. I sleep in the front office. He rushed to add, just until after Christmas, when some of the visitors clear out and we can find you proper lodging. Melissa stared at him aghast. You're offering me a jail cell? It's that or the church, which has no heat at night, he said apologetically. The Reverend sleeps at home. Pride warred with practicality in Melissa's mind. A jail cell? But what choice did she have? Very well, Sheriff, she finally said, standing and smoothing her skirts. I accept your unconventional offer of hospitality, temporarily. Relief flickered across his face. I'll show you there now, and then perhaps you join me for supper at the cafe. It's the least the town can do under the circumstances. As they stepped back into the cold, Melissa pulled her woolen cloak tighter. This was not the arrival she had imagined, not the husband she had expected, not the Christmas she had hoped for. But as the sheriff carried her trunk down the snow-covered boardwalk, his straight back and sure steps oddly reassuring, Melissa lifted her chin. She was not one to surrender to circumstance. She would face this unexpected turn of events with dignity and determination. After all, what other choice did she have? The Timber Ridge jailhouse was a squat, sturdy building of rough-hewn timber with a small sign proclaiming Sheriff's Office hanging crookedly above the door. Inside, a pot-bellied stove radiated welcome warmth into a simple office, which contained a desk piled with papers, 2 straight-back chairs, and a gun rack. A narrow hallway led to 3 cells at the back. You can use this one, Sheriff Reynolds said, setting her trunk down in the last cell. It contained a cot with surprisingly clean linens, a small table, and a washstand. It's the furthest from the entrance. I've installed a curtain for privacy. He gestured to a heavy canvas that could be drawn across the barred door. You've been most thoughtful, Sheriff, Melissa acknowledged, trying to ignore the iron bars as she surveyed her temporary home. Caleb, he said unexpectedly, I beg your pardon? If we're to be sharing quarters, even like this, it seems formal to keep calling me Sheriff. My name is Caleb. Then I'm Melissa. A momentary silence fell between them. I'll let you get settled, he said finally. The cafe serves supper until 7. I've got rounds to make, but I can meet you there at 6. After he left, Melissa sank onto the cot, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to fall. She had left everything familiar behind for a new life with a man she'd never met, and now that man was dead. What would become of her? She knew she couldn't change her circumstances by weeping. Melissa washed her face, changed into her second-best dress, and pinned up her chestnut hair afresh. By the time she met Caleb at what was named Rosie's Cafe, she had composed herself sufficiently to face the curious stares of Timber Ridge's residents. The cafe was warm and fragrant, with the smell of beef stew and fresh bread. A plump, red-faced woman with iron-gray hair approached as they were seated. So you're Sheriff Wilson's mail-order bride, she said bluntly, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm Rosie McKinney. This is my place. I'm Melissa Hughes, she replied, extending her hand, though I suppose I'm no one's bride now. Something softened in Rosie's expression. A terrible business, that shootout. Sheriff Wilson was a good man, if a bit stiff-necked. What will you do now, dear? I haven't decided yet, Melissa admitted. Perhaps find employment until I can save for passage home. Well, you're welcome to eat here tonight on the house, Rosie declared. It's the Christian thing to do. As she bustled away to fetch their supper, Caleb leaned forward. Don't mind the stairs. It's a small town. News travels fast. I understand. Sheriff Wilson. Was he well liked? Respected, mostly. He was fair but rigid. He insisted everyone follow the letter of the law, which didn't always sit well in a frontier town. Caleb hesitated. The situation with the ranchers and shepherds had him walking a fine line. What exactly is happening between them? Melissa asked, grateful for a topic beyond her uncertain future. The usual. Cattle ranchers settled here first. When the shepherds arrived, the ranchers claimed that the sheep would destroy the grazing land. Shepherds say there's room for both. With the hard winter, tempers are flaring over the limited good pasturage. Their conversation paused as Rosie returned with steaming bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. "The mayor's looking for you, Sheriff Reynolds," she informed him. "Something about the Christmas Eve festival. He says everything's falling to pieces without Mrs. Abernathy to organize it." Caleb groaned. Sheriff Wilson was supposed to oversee the festival security. The committee's been in disarray since his death. "What sort of festival is it?" Melissa asked, blowing on a spoonful of the hearty stew. "It's a town tradition. There's to be a bonfire in the square. Singing, food, and gifts for the children. It usually brings everyone together. But this year," he shrugged. "Between Wilson's death and the tensions, no one's stepping up to coordinate." "Perhaps I could help," Melissa offered, surprising herself. "I organized several charity events for my church in Boston." Caleb studied her with new interest. "You'd do that?" "It would give me purpose while I consider my options," she replied practically. "And I've always loved Christmas." A small grin transformed his serious face. "Mayor Simmons will be relieved. He's been fretting about it for days." By the time they finished their meal, Melissa had learned much about Timber Ridge and its inhabitants. The town had grown rapidly in the past 5 years, with cattle ranchers like the Harrington brothers claiming vast tracts to the north, and newcomers like Eli Cohen and his extended family bringing sheep to the southern valleys just last year. And somewhere in between, the townsfolk try to stay neutral while making a living off both sides, Caleb explained, walking her back to the jailhouse through the gently falling snow. Inside, he stoked the stove and showed her where he kept the coffee and supplies. "I sleep light, so don't worry about safety," he assured her. "No one will bother you here." As Melissa prepared for bed behind her canvas curtain, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. This was not the Christmas she had envisioned when boarding the train in Boston. Yet somehow, the simple jailhouse cell felt safer than she would have expected. Knowing Sheriff Reynolds, Caleb was just beyond the curtain. Sleep claimed her quickly, exhaustion from her journey and emotional turmoil finally taking its toll. Her last conscious thought was of Caleb's unexpected smile and how it had transformed his weather-worn face from forbidding to almost handsome. The next morning, Mayor Howard Simmons practically wept with gratitude when Caleb introduced Melissa as a volunteer to help salvage the Christmas Eve festival. A portly man with mutton chop whiskers and an anxious disposition, the mayor had been overwhelmed by the combination of holiday preparations and community tensions. "Miss Hughes, you're heaven sent," he declared, pumping her hand enthusiastically in his office above the general store. "Mrs. Abernathy always handled everything, but she's laid up with influenza, and no one else has stepped forward." Melissa was given a cluttered desk in the corner of the mayor's office, along with the remnants of Mrs. Abernathy's notes, which consisted of scattered papers covered in spidery handwriting detailing everything from candle orders to choir arrangements. "It's a disaster," the mayor moaned. "The cattle ranchers refuse to contribute beef for the feast if the shepherds are invited. The shepherds say they won't come if Harrington's men are armed. Half the choir won't sing with the other half. And who's to hang the decorations with Sheriff Wilson gone?" "We'll sort it out," Melissa assured him with more confidence than she felt. "First, let me see the festival site." Caleb accompanied them to the town square, where a massive pile of logs awaited the Christmas Eve bonfire. A raised platform stood nearby, presumably for the choir, and bare wooden stalls lined the perimeter, waiting for vendors. "We need evergreen boughs," Melissa decided, for the stalls and platform, and lanterns hung from the buildings. Sheriff Wilson was to organize men to decorate. "The deputies," Caleb confirmed, "but they're stretched thin patrolling the boundaries between the two factions." "Then we'll find volunteers," Melissa stated. "Mayor Simmons, please introduce me to some townsfolk who might help." By midday, Melissa had met a dozen residents of Timber Ridge, each sharing their perspective on the community divide. Mrs. Peterson, the milliner, complained that the sheepmen's wives didn't appreciate quality hats. Mr. Finch, the apothecary, worried the tension would affect his business with both sides. Young Matthew Cooper, who worked at the livery stable, simply looked glum at the prospect of a divided Christmas celebration. "Why not separate the contributions?" Melissa suggested to the mayor over lunch. "The cattle ranchers can provide beef, and the shepherds can provide wool goods for gifts. Neither has to acknowledge the other directly, but both can participate. That might work, the mayor said thoughtfully. But who'll decorate? Every able-bodied man is either working, taking sides, or avoiding trouble. What about the children? Melissa proposed. I saw several boys standing around near the general store with nothing to do. If we make it an adventure, they might help hang decorations. We can promise treats for those who help willingly. By afternoon, Melissa had recruited 8 boys between the ages of 10 and 14 to assist with decorating under her supervision. With Caleb's permission, she promised them each a peppermint stick in a place of honor near the bonfire. You're good with them, Caleb observed, watching her organize the boys into teams. He had appeared periodically throughout the day. I taught school briefly in Boston, she explained. Boys this age need purpose and recognition. As the children scattered to gather pine boughs under the supervision of Matthew Cooper, Caleb asked, "How are you holding up? This isn't what you came to Montana for." Melissa paused, considering. Truthfully, I'm still stunned by how quickly my plans collapsed, but I've never been one to wallow. Forward motion is preferable to stagnation. A practical philosophy, he commented with approval. And you, Sheriff? Is keeping the peace between shepherds and cattlemen what you expected when you accepted the badge? A shadow crossed his face. I've worn a badge before and gave it up after. He stopped abruptly. Let's just say I prefer working alone, answering to no one but myself. This temporary position is already more complicated than I'd like. Before she could inquire further, a commotion erupted from the direction of the general store. Raised voices carried across the square, and Caleb immediately straightened. Stay here, he instructed, striding toward the disturbance. Melissa, of course, did no such thing. Following at a discreet distance, she arrived to find Caleb inserting himself between 2 angry men. One man wore denim and leather of a cattle hand. The other man wore a heavy wool coat typical of the shepherds. He called us filthy foreigners, the shepherd was shouting, his accent marking him as one of the Cohen family. He said our sheep are destroying the territory. You people are ruining good cattle country, the ranch hand retorted. Harrington should have run you out months ago. That's enough, Caleb's voice cut through the argument. Davidson, get back to the Harrington ranch. Cohen, go home to your family. This ends now. Both men glared, but backed down under Caleb's steady gaze. As they departed in opposite directions, Melissa approached. Is this a daily occurrence? She asked quietly. It's becoming more frequent, Caleb admitted, his expression grim. Sheriff Wilson's death has emboldened some. They think I won't enforce the peace as he did. Will you? His gaze was surprisingly intense. I gave my word to keep this town safe until spring. I don't give my word lightly, Miss Hughes. Something in his tone stirred an unexpected flutter in Melissa's chest. She cleared her throat. Well then, Sheriff, perhaps we should consider how the festival might ease tensions, rather than inflame them. By evening, Melissa had drafted a complete plan for the Christmas Eve celebration. The choir would perform first, followed by the children's pageant. Food would be served from separate stalls to avoid direct confrontation. The lighting of the bonfire would be a community moment, with the mayor delivering a speech about unity and peace. It's ambitious, Caleb commented as they reviewed her notes over dinner at the jailhouse. He had brought back stew from Rosie's, and they sat at his desk sharing the meal. But if anyone can make it work, I suspect it's you. You've known me all of one day, Sheriff, Melissa reminded him, secretly pleased by his confidence. I'm a good judge of character, he replied simply. I've had to be, in my line of work. Melissa took a chance. And what does your judgment tell you about me? Caleb studied her for a long moment, his expression softening. That you're stronger than you look. Practical, determined. A hint of his rare smile appeared. And too good for a jail cell, but making the best of it. Melissa felt warmth spread through her. That's high praise from a man who tracks outlaws for a living. Former occupation, he corrected, though tracking people isn't so different from tracking problems, and this town has plenty of those. As they cleared away the dishes, Melissa felt an unexpected jolt of awareness, followed by confusion. This man wasn't her intended husband. He wasn't even planning to stay in Timber Ridge past winter. Yet something about his quiet competence and hidden depths intrigued her. Later, as she prepared for bed, Melissa heard Caleb moving quietly in the office, checking locks and banking the fire. It was strange how quickly the jailhouse had begun to feel like a kind of home. It was a temporary shelter, yes, but one where she felt unexpectedly secure. Tomorrow would bring more festival preparations and, no doubt, more community tensions to navigate. But for now, with snow falling gently outside and the steady presence of Sheriff Caleb Reynolds just beyond the curtain, Melissa found herself facing her uncertain future with growing confidence. Perhaps there was still room for Christmas magic, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity as Melissa threw herself into festival preparations. The town gradually responded to her enthusiasm, with more volunteers stepping forward to assist. Even those firmly entrenched in either the cattle or sheep camp seemed willing to contribute under her diplomatic direction. "You've worked miracles," Mayor Simmons declared on December 23rd, surveying the transformed town square. Evergreen garlands draped the stalls, red ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and lanterns stood ready to be lit on Christmas Eve. Mrs. Abernathy herself couldn't have done better. Exhaustion pulled at Melissa. The children did most of the decorating, and Mr. Finch's wife organized the choir beautifully once I suggested separate rehearsals. What she didn't mention was how she'd spent hours reconciling conflicting demands, mediating petty disputes, and soothing ruffled feathers. The undercurrent of tension remained, but at least the festival would proceed. She saw Caleb only in passing, as his duties kept him patrolling the increasingly fractious boundaries between the two groups. Each night, she'd return to the jailhouse to find evidence of his presence. There would be a fresh pot of coffee, more wood for the stove, and even a small bundle of pine boughs to make the place smell better, according to the note he'd left. Their interactions were brief but increasingly comfortable. Melissa found herself looking forward to their shared moments. Sometimes they had a quick exchange over morning coffee. Other times it was a status update as they passed on the street, or the occasional shared meal when their schedules aligned. Even with what appeared to be a gruff exterior, Caleb proved to be thoughtful and perceptive, with a dry humor that emerged when he let his guard down. On the afternoon before Christmas Eve, Melissa was directing the placement of the final stall when she noticed a commotion at the edge of town. A group of men on horseback approached. She immediately recognized the ranch hands from the Harrington spread, led by the elder Harrington brother himself. Bradley Harrington had a commanding presence. He was tall with a thick mustache and the weathered complexion of a man who'd spent decades under the western sun. His expression was thunderous as he dismounted and strode toward the mayor, who had hurried out to intercept him. Melissa edged closer, concerned by the confrontation brewing. "I've just heard the news, Simmons," Harrington boomed. "You've got that foreign shepherd, Abraham Cohen, delivering the Christmas blessing at the festival? Have you lost your mind?" The mayor wrung his hands. "Now, Bradley, Reverend Phillips always invites a community member to share a few words. This year he chose Abraham as a gesture of inclusion." "Inclusion?" Harrington spat. "Those sheep herders are destroying Montana territory." "My men won't stand for it. Either Abraham Cohen steps down, or we boycott the whole damn festival." A crowd began to gather, murmurs rippling through the townsfolk. Melissa spotted Caleb approaching rapidly from the direction of the sheriff's office, his expression alert but controlled. "Mr. Harrington," Melissa stepped forward, ignoring the mayor's alarmed look. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Melissa Hughes." Harrington blinked, momentarily diverted from his tirade. "Sheriff Wilson's mail-order bride? I heard about you. Sorry for your troubles, ma'am, but this isn't your concern." "As festival coordinator, I believe it is," Melissa replied evenly. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately. The children are watching." She gestured towards several young boys who had paused in their decorating to stare at the confrontation. Something flickered in Harrington's eyes. Was it embarrassment, perhaps? "Mayor's office. 5 minutes." As he stalked away, Caleb reached Melissa's side. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he murmured. "Bradley Harrington doesn't compromise easily." "Neither do I," Melissa replied with determination. "Will you join us? Your presence might help keep tempers in check." The meeting that followed was tense but productive. With Caleb's steady presence by the door and Melissa's diplomatic persistence, a compromise emerged. Both Abraham Cohen and Bradley Harrington's foreman would deliver brief Christmas greetings, representing both communities. This doesn't change anything fundamental, Bradley Harrington warned as he rose to leave. Come spring, we'll see who has rights to the western pastures. But it allows for a peaceful Christmas, Melissa pointed out. Surely that's worth something, Mr. Harrington? The rancher studied her thoughtfully. Sheriff Wilson chose his potential wife well, even if fate intervened. Good day, Miss Hughes. After he departed, the mayor collapsed into his chair. That could have been disastrous. How did you know he'd listen to reason? I didn't, Melissa admitted, but men like Bradley Harrington value strength. Cowering would only have reinforced his position. Caleb, who had remained silent throughout most of the exchange, gave her an appraising look. You understand people well for someone new to our territory. Human nature doesn't change with geography, Sheriff. Though I'm learning that Western directness has its advantages over Eastern subtlety. As they left the mayor's office together, Caleb said quietly, I should warn you. Where Bradley Harrington goes, the Cohen family will likely follow. Expect a visit from Abraham or his brother Eli soon. He was right. Before sunset, Eli Cohen appeared at the festival grounds demanding equal representation. With the groundwork already laid, Melissa easily incorporated his concerns into the program. By evening, both factions had grudgingly accepted the arrangements, though Melissa harbored no illusions that the underlying conflict was resolved. You've postponed a range war through Christmas at least, Caleb commented as they walked back to the jailhouse in the gathering dusk. Snow had begun to fall again, gentle flakes catching in Melissa's hair and on the shoulders of her cloak. Is that what's coming? She asked soberly. A range war? Caleb's expression darkened. I've seen it before. Different territory, same story. Without compromise from both sides, blood gets spilled. And where do you stand in this conflict, Sheriff? He was quiet for several steps before answering. I've learned not to take sides in other people's fights. My job is to uphold the law, not judge who deserves the land. A diplomatic answer, Melissa observed. Not diplomacy, experience. Taking sides got good people killed in a dispute I once tried to settle. I won't make that mistake again. They had reached the jailhouse and Caleb moved ahead to unlock the door. Inside, Melissa was surprised to find a small fir tree standing in the corner of the office, simply adorned with string-threaded popcorn and a few red ribbons. What's this? She asked, delighted. Caleb looked almost embarrassed. Thought you might want something festive, being Christmas Eve tomorrow. He shrugged. The Cooper boy helped me bring it in. Touched beyond measure by this unexpected gesture, it's wonderful. Thank you. Their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Melissa felt that strange flutter in her chest again. In just a few days, this taciturn lawman had shown her more consideration than many who had known her for years. It's nothing, he said gruffly, turning away to stoke the fire. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be busy. As Melissa retired to her cell room, closing the canvas curtain behind her, she found herself thinking not of the festival challenges ahead, nor of her uncertain future, but of the man whose gruff exterior concealed such unexpected thoughtfulness. A man who claimed to avoid taking sides, yet had gone out of his way to bring Christmas cheer to a stranded stranger. Perhaps Timber Ridge held more possibilities than she had first imagined. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, the sun glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. Melissa woke early, excitement and nervousness mingling as she dressed in her best gown, which was a burgundy wool with subtle black trim that she'd packed for her wedding. The irony wasn't lost on her, wearing it now for a town festival rather than to meet her intended husband. When she emerged from behind her curtain, she found Caleb already up, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. Merry Christmas Eve, he greeted her, offering 1 cup. He'd shaved and worn a clean shirt under his usual vest, his badge polished to a shine. Something about seeing him so carefully groomed sent a flutter through Melissa. You look very official today, Sheriff, she commented while accepting the coffee gratefully. Festival security, he explained with a laugh. With both factions in town, I need to look the part. He hesitated, then added, "You look nice. That color suits you." The simple compliment warmed her more than the coffee. "Thank you. It was meant for—" She stopped abruptly. "Your wedding," he finished quietly. "I'm sorry things didn't turn out as you planned." Melissa lifted her chin. "Life rarely does. But today isn't about my disappointments. It's about bringing some Christmas joy to Timber Ridge." Caleb's expression softened. "You've already done that. The town hasn't been this united since before the shepherds arrived." After a quick breakfast, they parted ways. Caleb needed to coordinate with his deputies about security. Melissa headed to the town square for final preparations. The festival would begin at noon and continue into the evening, culminating in the lighting of the bonfire at dusk. By mid-morning, the square hummed with activity. Stall keepers arranged their wares. There was everything from baked goods to handcrafted toys. The choir rehearsed on the platform as children darted excitedly between adults, their anticipation intense. Melissa moved through it all, checking details, resolving last-minute issues, and encouraging volunteers. She barely had a moment to think about her own circumstances as she ensured everything ran smoothly. Around noon, the festivities officially began with the mayor's welcome speech. Families filled the square, momentarily setting aside their differences in the spirit of Christmas. Melissa watched with satisfaction as cattle ranchers and shepherds occupied opposite sides of the square, but participated in the same celebration. "You've worked a minor miracle," a voice observed beside her. Melissa turned to find Rosie from the cafe, offering a steaming mug of cider. "You should be proud." "Everyone contributed," Melissa demurred, accepting the warm drink gratefully. "I merely coordinated." "Humph. False modesty doesn't suit you," Rosie retorted good-naturedly with a laugh. "The whole town's talking about how you stood up to Bradley Harrington yesterday and got Abraham Cohen to compromise on his speech time. Neither man is known for bending." Melissa sipped her cider. "Sometimes all people need is to feel heard." "And sometimes they need a firm hand," Rosie countered. "You provided both." She glanced across the square where Caleb stood monitoring the proceedings, his tall figure easily visible. "The sheriff's been watching you, you know." Heat that had nothing to do with the cider rose to Melissa's cheeks. "He's watching everyone. It's his job." Rosie's knowing look suggested she wasn't fooled. "If you say so, dear, though I haven't seen him smile that much since he arrived in town." Before Melissa could formulate a response, she spotted trouble brewing near the food stalls. One of Harrington's ranch hands appeared to be arguing with Eli Cohen's son David. Without hesitation, she headed toward the confrontation, arriving just as Caleb intervened. "Take it elsewhere or cool off in a cell," he was telling the cowboys firmly. "It's your choice." The men subsided, muttering, but the tension remained. Melissa caught Caleb's eye, and he gave her a subtle nod that somehow conveyed both appreciation for her concern and reassurance that he had matters under control. Throughout the afternoon, similar small flare-ups occurred, but each was quickly diffused. The children's pageant proceeded without incident, drawing grins from even the most hard-bitten ranchers as the youngest citizens of Timber Ridge enacted the Christmas story. As dusk approached, Melissa found herself positioned near the unlit bonfire, watching as townsfolk gathered for the event. The children's choir sang Silent Night in sweet, clear voices that carried across the hushed square. For a moment it seemed the spirit of Christmas had truly bridged the community's divisions. Then came the time for the promised speeches. Abraham Cohen spoke first, his accented English carrying clearly as he expressed gratitude for the community and hopes for peaceful coexistence. Bradley Harrington's foreman followed with briefer remarks emphasizing tradition and the cattle industry's importance to the territory. Though neither directly addressed the conflict, the undercurrent remained evident to anyone listening closely. Mayor Simmons concluded with a plea for Christmas harmony before inviting the crowd to count down to the lighting of the bonfire. As voices joined in unison for the countdown, Melissa felt a presence beside her and turned to find Caleb. "Everything's gone well," she said quietly. "Better than I dared hope." "Thanks to you," he replied, his voice low. In the gathering darkness, his features were softened, making him appear younger, less careworn. You've given this town a real Christmas, Melissa. The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. Before she could respond, the countdown reached 1, and cheers erupted as the bonfire blazed to life, casting golden light across the snow-covered square. In that moment of celebration, with firelight illuminating joyful faces and Christmas carols rising into the star-filled sky, Melissa felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected to find in this strange place so far from home. Her gaze met Caleb's across the dancing flames, and something unspoken passed between them. It was a recognition, perhaps, that they had created something meaningful together. The spell was broken by the mayor's announcement that hot chocolate and cookies awaited the children at the refreshment stalls. As the crowd dispersed, Caleb touched Melissa's elbow lightly. "I need to check in with my deputies and then make a final patrol," he said. "Will you be all right getting back to the jailhouse?" "Of course," she assured him. "I'll probably stay a while longer." Rosie mentioned needing help distributing the remaining food to some of the poorer families. "I shouldn't be too late. Leave the lamp burning." As he moved away, Melissa found herself watching his retreating figure longer than strictly necessary. In just a few days, this man had shifted from stranger to, what? Not quite a friend, yet something more than an acquaintance. Something she had no proper name for. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of activity as Melissa helped distribute leftover food and bid farewell to departing families. By the time she finally walked back to the jailhouse, most of Timber Ridge had retired to their homes, though light and music still spilled from the saloon at the far end of the street. Inside the jailhouse, she found it empty, but warm, the stove freshly stoked. The small Christmas tree Caleb had provided glowed with the light of a single candle carefully secured among its branches. It was another thoughtful touch. Melissa removed her cloak and gloves, settling into one of the office chairs with a contented sigh. She must have dozed off, for the next thing she knew, the door opened quietly and Caleb entered, bringing a swirl of cold air and snowflakes with him. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said softly, hanging his hat and coat. "I'm glad you did," Melissa replied, straightening. "How were your rounds?" "Peaceful. Almost everyone's home celebrating their own Christmas." He moved to the stove, warming his hands. "Even the saloon's quieter than usual." Melissa noticed he'd brought something with him. It was a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string. Following her gaze, Caleb looked almost embarrassed. "It's nothing much," he said, retrieving the package and holding it out to her. "Just, well, it being Christmas Eve and all." Surprised and touched, Melissa accepted the gift. "I have nothing for you," she admitted. "You've given plenty to this town already," he replied. "Go on, open it." Carefully untying the string, Melissa unwrapped the package to reveal a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered it was a journal, its pages blank and waiting. "I noticed you writing notes for the festival on any scrap of paper you could find," Caleb explained. "I thought you might like something proper to write in. For your thoughts or plans or whatever comes next for you." "It's perfect," she said softly. "Thank you." Melissa felt that now familiar flutter in her chest intensify. Here was a man who noticed details, who saw her clearly while knowing her for only a few days. Caleb cleared his throat. "I should let you get some rest. Christmas services are at 9 tomorrow." "Yes, of course." Melissa rose, clutching the journal. At the entrance to the cell area, she paused. "Merry Christmas, Caleb." His smile, which was wider than she'd yet seen, transformed his face entirely. "Merry Christmas, Melissa." As she prepared for bed behind her curtain, she realized that whatever uncertainty tomorrow might bring, tonight she felt a surprising contentment. Timber Ridge was not where she had planned to spend Christmas, and Caleb Reynolds was not the husband she had journeyed west to marry. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, a day for hope, for new beginnings. As sleep claimed her, Melissa wondered what further surprises this unexpected Montana Christmas might hold. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the small window of Melissa's cell and casting patterns across the floor. For a moment she lay still, remembering Christmas mornings in Boston. Memories of family gatherings now years past, and the more recent holidays spent in increasingly diminished circumstances as an unmarried woman dependent on relatives' charity. How strange that this Christmas, which she was spending in a jail cell in a frontier town far from everything familiar, somehow felt more hopeful than those of recent years. She dressed carefully in her Sunday best, with a navy blue dress with subtle white trim, and arranged her hair in a simple yet elegant style. When she emerged from behind the curtain, she found Caleb already dressed for church in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and what appeared to be his only suit coat, somewhat worn at the elbows but well brushed. "Merry Christmas," he greeted her, offering a cup of coffee and a plate with slices of bread and preserves. "Although it's not much of a Christmas breakfast, I'm afraid." "It's perfect," Melissa assured him, accepting both gratefully. "Merry Christmas to you too." They ate in silence, the small Christmas tree lending a festive air to the humble office. Melissa found herself studying Caleb when he wasn't looking. She noted the strong line of his jaw, now cleanly shaved, the way his dark hair curled at his collar, and the capable hands that held his coffee cup. In just a few days, this man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "Ready for church?" he asked eventually, checking his pocket watch. "We should head over soon if we want seats." The small church was already filling when they arrived. Everyone was dressed in their finest. Melissa noticed the same division that had characterized the festival. Cattle families sat on one side and sheep families on the other. But the atmosphere remained peaceful, subdued by the solemnity of Christmas worship. As they slipped into one of the few remaining pews near the back, Melissa was acutely aware of Caleb beside her, his shoulder occasionally brushing hers in the crowded space. Reverend Phillips delivered a message of peace and goodwill that seemed pointedly relevant to Timber Ridge's situation, though he never directly referenced the community tensions. The familiar Christmas scriptures and carols brought comfort to Melissa, a thread of continuity connecting her past life to this unexpected present. During the final hymn, "O Come, All Ye Faithful," Melissa found herself singing the harmony part as she always had in her Boston church choir. Caleb glanced at her with appreciative surprise, and she felt a flush of pleasure at his notice. As the service concluded and people began to file out, exchanging Christmas greetings, Melissa observed something interesting. Despite the physical separation during worship, there was a noticeable thaw in the interactions between the two factions. Nods were exchanged where previously there had been averted gazes. Brief greetings replaced stony silence. The Christmas spirit, combined with yesterday's successful festival, seemed to have created a fragile truce. "Your festival did some good," Caleb commented quietly as they waited to exit. "I haven't seen Bradley Harrington and Eli Cohen acknowledge each other in months." "Christmas has a way of softening hearts," Melissa replied, "though I suspect the peace is temporary." "Even temporary peace has value." Outside the church, they were approached by Mayor Simmons and his wife, a plump, cheerful woman who clasped Melissa's hands warmly. "You must join us for Christmas dinner, Miss Hughes," Mrs. Simmons insisted. "We have plenty, and no one should be alone today of all days." She glanced at Caleb. "You too, Sheriff." "Unless you have other plans?" Melissa hesitated, touched by the invitation but aware of Caleb's reluctance to socialize. To her surprise, he answered for both of them. "We'd be honored, Mrs. Simmons. What time would you like us?" 2 o'clock, she beamed. "It's nothing fancy, but there'll be turkey and all the trimmings." As the Simmons moved away to greet other parishioners, Melissa spoke to Caleb. "I thought you avoided social gatherings." A hint of color appeared on his cheekbones. It seemed rude to refuse. "And you shouldn't be eating Christmas dinner in a jailhouse." Melissa corrected softly with a laugh. "You shouldn't either." Their eyes met briefly before they were interrupted by Abraham Cohen approaching with his wife and teenage son. "Miss Hughes," Cohen greeted her with a slight bow, "my family wishes to thank you for your work on the festival. It meant much to our children to be included." "It was my pleasure, Mr. Cohen," Melissa replied sincerely. "Your community's contributions made the celebration richer for everyone." Mrs. Cohen, a petite woman, added, "We have brought something for you." She handed Melissa a small package wrapped in cloth. "A Christmas gift to thank you." Touched, Melissa unwrapped it to find a beautiful hand-knitted scarf of soft wool in deep blue. "It's lovely, thank you so much." Made from our own sheep's wool, Mrs. Cohen said proudly. First season's shearing in Montana. As the Cohen family moved on, Melissa noticed Bradley Harrington watching the exchange from across the churchyard, his expression unreadable. When he caught her eye, he turned away. You've made an impression on both sides, Caleb observed. That's no small feat. I've done nothing but treat everyone with basic respect, Melissa replied, carefully wrapping the scarf around her neck. It is something that seems in short supply here lately. Sometimes that's all it takes, he said quietly. One person willing to see both sides. They spent the hours before dinner walking through town, where Christmas celebrations continued in homes and boarding houses. The air was crisp and clear, the sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered street. Melissa found herself relaxing into Caleb's company, their conversation flowing easily from town affairs to personal histories. What made you become a bounty hunter? She asked as they passed the livery stable, where even the horses seemed to be enjoying a quieter Christmas day. Caleb was silent for several steps before answering. After I gave up the badge, my previous one, he clarified, I needed work that let me keep moving. Staying in one place, he shook his head, wasn't good for me then. And now? Will you return to it after winter? His expression grew thoughtful. A week ago, I'd have said yes without hesitation. Now, he glanced at her briefly, I find myself less certain. The implication hung between them, unspoken but tangible. Melissa felt her pulse quicken, but didn't press further. Whatever was developing between them was too new, too fragile for direct examination. Christmas dinner with the Simmons family proved to be exactly what Melissa needed. It was a taste of home and family on a day when she might otherwise have felt the absence of both acutely. The mayor and his wife had also invited the town doctor and his spinster sister, creating a small but convivial gathering. Caleb, to Melissa's surprise, revealed himself to be an engaging dinner companion, sharing carefully edited stories from his travels that had everyone laughing. Watching him with the others, she glimpsed the man he might have been before. Whatever tragedy had driven him to a solitary life, tracking outlaws. As they walked back to the jailhouse in the early evening, snowflakes beginning to drift down again, Melissa found herself wishing the day wouldn't end. Being with Caleb had become comfortable in a way she hadn't experienced with a man before, perhaps because their relationship had begun with no expectations beyond basic courtesy. Thank you for today, she said as they reached the jailhouse door, for accompanying me to dinner, for making Christmas special. Caleb's expression softened in the lamplight. You're the one who's brought something special to Timber Ridge. To, he hesitated, then finished simply, to all of us. Inside, the little tree welcomed them with its simple decorations, and Caleb stoked the fire to ward off the evening chill. Melissa removed her new scarf, admiring its craftsmanship in the warm light. It suits you, Caleb observed. That color. Mrs. Cohen has a good eye, Melissa agreed. It was such a thoughtful gift. As was this, she added, retrieving the journal he'd given her from her cell. I've already made my first entry. Oh, his interest was evident, though he quickly added, not that it's any of my business what you write. It's nothing private, Melissa offered, just reflections on finding Christmas joy in unexpected places and with unexpected people. Something changed in the air between them. A shift, a deepening. Caleb took a half-step closer, then stopped himself. Melissa, he began, his voice lower than usual. I know this isn't what you came to Montana for. You came to be a wife, to build a life with Sheriff Wilson. I'm just a temporary sheriff in a town with problems, a man with a past I don't talk about. But these past days... Whatever he might have said next was lost as shouts erupted outside, followed by the sound of running feet. Caleb's expression instantly shifted to alert concern. Stay here, he ordered, grabbing his hat and gun belt. Lock the door behind me. Before Melissa could protest, he was gone, leaving her with the unfinished conversation hanging in the air and a growing sense of foreboding. Something was wrong in Timber Ridge, and on Christmas night of all times. Moving to the window, she peered out into the snowy darkness, watching Caleb's figure disappear down the street toward the commotion. Whatever peace the day had brought seemed suddenly fragile, threatened by the harsh realities of frontier life. Caleb returned over an hour later, his expression grim as he stamped snow from his boots. "Drunken brawl at the saloon?" he explained tersely. "It turned ugly when someone mentioned sheep on cattleland." Melissa, who had been anxiously waiting by the stove, immediately poured him a cup of coffee. "Was anyone hurt?" "Cuts and bruises, mostly." He accepted the coffee gratefully. "I had to lock up 3 men to cool off overnight. They're sleeping it off in the cells." The realization dawned on Melissa immediately. The cells? But where will I moved your belongings to the office," Caleb interrupted. "You can take my cot and I'll use the chair. It's just for tonight. I couldn't possibly—" "Melissa," his voice softened. "Please. It's been a long night, and it's still Christmas. Let's not argue." Too tired to protest further, Melissa headed towards the office. It was small but private enough with the door closed. As she settled onto Caleb's cot, surrounded by the scent of leather and pine that she'd come to associate with him, she reflected on how quickly circumstances could change in this frontier town. The next morning brought gray skies and the promise of more snow. The 3 prisoners were released with warnings, leaving the cells empty once more. Melissa should have felt relieved to return to her temporary quarters, but something had shifted during the night. The jailhouse no longer felt like a place of emergency shelter, but almost like home. The thought was unsettling. Timber Ridge wasn't her home. She had no proper place here, no role beyond the temporary assistance she'd provided with the festival. Yet the idea of leaving created an unexpected ache in her chest. "A penny for your thoughts?" Caleb asked, interrupting her reverie as they shared breakfast. Melissa hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her. "What happens after winter? When the new sheriff arrives?" Something flickered across Caleb's face. Was it regret, perhaps? "I haven't thought that far ahead. Go back to bounty hunting, I suppose." "And me? What becomes of the mail-order bride with no groom?" She attempted a light tone but couldn't quite pull it off. Caleb set down his coffee cup. "You have options. Mayor Simmons mentioned yesterday that the town needs a teacher. Your experience in Boston would qualify you." "He discussed this with you?" Melissa asked, surprised. "People have noticed your way with the children during festival preparations," he explained, "and your organizational abilities. Timber Ridge could use someone like you permanently." The idea was appealing, much more appealing than Melissa wanted to admit, but there was another question she needed answered. "And you? Could Timber Ridge use someone like you permanently?" The directness of her question seemed to catch him off guard. Caleb looked away, his profile stern in the morning light. "I told you, Melissa. I've stopped calling any place home." "Not since—" He trailed off. "Since what happened with your previous badge?" she prompted gently. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice low and controlled, he began to speak. "I was sheriff in a Wyoming town 3 years ago. There was a similar situation, ranchers feuding with newcomers and tensions building. I tried to maintain peace and enforce the law equally." Caleb's voice was almost flat, and each word seemingly carefully chosen. "There was a woman, Sarah. She was the daughter of one of the ranchers. We were close." He paused and Melissa remained silent, sensing the difficulty of his confession. "When the violence finally erupted, I was caught in the middle. Sarah tried to intervene in a confrontation between her father and one of the newcomers." His hands tightened around his coffee cup. "She was killed. A stray bullet. I never could determine whose gun it came from." "I'm so sorry," Melissa whispered. "Her father blamed me. He said if I'd taken proper sides from the beginning and enforced the established rancher's claims instead of trying to be fair to everyone, she'd still be alive." Caleb's eyes, when they finally connected with hers, held a pain that made her ache. Maybe he was right. "I don't know, but I couldn't wear the badge there anymore. I couldn't face the town. So I left and took up bounty hunting. It is simpler to track clear outlaws than to judge between neighbors." Melissa reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "You did what you believed was right. No one can ask more than that." And now here I am in another town with the same tensions brewing. He gave a bitter laugh. When Mayor Simmons convinced me to pin on this badge temporarily, I told myself it was different. I'd be gone before spring, before the real trouble started. Is that still what you want? To be gone before you have to take sides again? Caleb turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining almost of their own accord. A week ago, yes. Now I find myself thinking there might be reasons to stay, to try again. The intimacy of the moment was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Caleb rose to answer. Mayor Simmons stood on the threshold, his expression anxious. Sheriff, we've got trouble. A telegram has just arrived from the territorial capital. There's an escaped prisoner heading this way, an outlaw by the name of Jake Harmon. Caleb's posture instantly stiffened. The Jake Harmon? That's what the telegram said. He escaped 3 days ago and stole a horse. He was last seen heading in this direction. Melissa saw something change in Caleb's face. I know Jake Harmon, he said grimly. I tracked him 2 years ago for a bank robbery in Colorado. He is a dangerous man. Do you think he's coming here specifically? The mayor asked nervously. He could have found out that I'm the sheriff here. I'm the one who brought him in last time. Caleb turned to Melissa, his expression now carefully neutral. Miss Hughes, I need to organize a search party and set up precautions. The sudden formality stung, but Melissa understood the reason. This was Caleb the lawman, not the man who had just shared his painful past with her. Of course, Sheriff, she replied with equal formality. How can I help? The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity as the town prepared for potential danger. Caleb organized patrols with his deputies, positioned lookouts on the town's perimeter, and briefed the townspeople on safety precautions. Jake Harmon was known to be vindictive and unpredictable. He was a man who held grudges and acted on them ruthlessly. Melissa found herself drawn into the preparations, helping coordinate food for the men on patrol and organizing the women to keep the children close to home. The crisis temporarily overshadowed the cattle-sheep tensions as common safety became everyone's priority. She saw Caleb only in passing during these days. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but distant, the intimacy of their Christmas conversations seemingly forgotten in the face of duty. Each night he returned to the jailhouse late after Melissa had retired behind her curtain and left before dawn. On the morning of December 28th, as Melissa helped Rosie prepare meals for the search parties, the cafe owner finally broached the subject. The sheriff's pulled away from you, she observed bluntly, kneading bread dough with practiced movements. Don't take it personally, dear. Men like him have patterns. When trouble comes, they retreat into themselves. It's not like that between us, Melissa protested, though her insides argued otherwise. Rosie gave her a knowing look. Isn't it? I've seen how you look at each other when you think no one's watching. Half the town has noticed. Melissa felt heat rise in her cheeks. We've become good friends, that's all. And now he has responsibilities that take precedence. Rosie divided the dough into loaves. Well, friend or more, that man's carrying a burden. My Charlie was the same way after the war. He couldn't let anyone close when he felt responsible for others' safety. It was like he was afraid his feelings would cloud his judgment. The observation struck uncomfortably close to what Melissa had been thinking. Caleb had revealed his past tragedy just before learning of a new threat. Was he deliberately distancing himself to avoid repeating history? That evening, Melissa was alone in the jailhouse, updating her journal by lamplight, when the door burst open. Caleb entered, his expression tense, followed by his 2 deputies. We've got reports of Jake Harmon less than 10 miles out, he announced. Mason spotted him near Timber Creek. You're going after him, Melissa asked, rising from her chair. At first light. Caleb turned to his deputies. Jenkins, organize provisions. Davis, check all weapons and ammunition. As they left to carry out their orders, he finally addressed Melissa directly. I need you to stay here tomorrow. Keep the door locked. Don't open it for anyone but me or my deputies. You believe I'm in danger? Caleb's expression softened fractionally. Harmon will use whatever leverage he can find. He might have been watching the town and has seen us together. He hesitated, then added more quietly, I won't risk you becoming a target. Like Sarah? The words slipped out before Melissa could stop them. Pain flashed across his face. That won't happen again. Not while I wear this badge. Caleb, Melissa said gently, stepping closer. You can't protect everyone by keeping them at arm's length. I can try, his jaw tightened. I've lost one person I cared about to violence. I won't lose another. The admission hung between them, its implications clear. Caleb cared for her, perhaps more deeply than either of them had acknowledged. Be careful tomorrow, Melissa said finally, understanding that now wasn't the time to press further. Promise me that. I promise. For a brief moment, the professional mask slipped, and he reached out to brush his fingers against hers. Lock the door behind me. After he left, Melissa moved mechanically through her evening routine, her mind filled with worry. She understood now why Caleb had withdrawn. It was not from indifference, but from fear. Fear of history repeating itself. Fear of failing to protect someone he was coming to care for. Sleep eluded her that night as she listened to the wind howling outside, bringing fresh snow and obscuring the stars. Somewhere out in that darkness, a dangerous man approached, perhaps seeking vengeance against the bounty hunter who had captured him once before. And tomorrow, Caleb would ride out to confront him, carrying not just the responsibility of a sheriff's badge, but the weight of past tragedy and newfound feelings he wasn't ready to acknowledge. Melissa clutched her journal tightly. She had come to Montana seeking security and purpose as a mail-order bride. Instead, she had found uncertainty and danger. But she also found connection, community, and perhaps something deeper with a man whose wounded soul mirrored aspects of her own. Whatever tomorrow brought, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Her future was no longer a matter of practical arrangements, but of matters of the heart she had never anticipated. Melissa woke before dawn to the sounds of men gathering in the street. Horses stomped in the cold, low voices planning, and weapons being checked. Hastily dressing, she moved to the office window, just in time to see Caleb mounting his horse, his expression stern beneath his hat brim. The search party consisted of 6 men, including himself, his deputies, and several volunteers from town. She opened the window a crack, letting in a blast of frigid air. "Sheriff!" she called softly. Caleb turned, riding closer to the window, keeping his voice low. "You should stay inside, Melissa." "I know. She hesitated, then reached through the window to touch his gloved hand, where it rested on the saddle horn. "Come back safely. All of you." Something in his expression softened. "We will. Keep that door locked." As the search party rode out of town, disappearing into the pale dawn light, Melissa closed the window and wrapped her arms around herself, fighting a sense of foreboding. The day stretched before her, empty and anxious. To distract herself, she set about cleaning the already tidy office and then took inventory of supplies. By mid-morning, restlessness drove her to ignore Caleb's instructions, partially at least. She locked the jailhouse carefully behind her and made her way to Rosie's Cafe, reasoning that the busy establishment offered safety in numbers. Rosie greeted her. "I thought the sheriff wanted you staying put." "I am going crazy in that small office." "I needed human company," Melissa admitted, helping herself to coffee. "And information? Have you heard anything?" "Nothing yet. It's too soon, I reckon." Rosie studied her. "You're sweet on him, aren't you?" There is no use denying it. Melissa then surrendered to the older woman's perception. "It's complicated. I came here to marry one man, but I find myself drawn to another. One who's determined to leave come spring." "Is he, though?" Rosie asked shrewdly. "A man doesn't look at a woman the way he looks at you if he's planning his departure." Before Melissa could respond, the cafe door burst open, admitting a snow-dusted Abraham Cohen. The shepherd's expression was urgent. He looked around, then spoke loudly to anyone who would listen. "My daughter Ruth, she has gone missing. Has anyone seen her?" Melissa set down her cup. "Missing? Since when?" "This morning. She went to collect eggs from our coop but never returned. My sons have been searching our property. Nothing." His voice broke. She is only 10 years old. Could she have wandered off? Perhaps following an animal? Melissa asked, reaching for her cloak. She knows better. And with this outlaw news, fear was evident on the man's face. A cold dread settled in Melissa's stomach. Rosie, send word to Mayor Simmons. Mr. Cohen, show me where you've already searched. In spite of her promise to Caleb, Melissa couldn't ignore a child in danger. Within minutes, she was on horseback, riding a gentle mare borrowed from the livery and following Abraham Cohen to his homestead south of town. The Cohen property consisted of a modest cabin, several outbuildings, and fenced areas where their sheep were kept. Sarah Cohen, Ruth's mother, greeted them. "Any sign?" she asked her husband desperately. "Nothing yet," he replied, helping Melissa dismount. "But Miss Hughes has come to help." "Show me where she was last seen," Melissa requested, pulling her cloak tighter against the bitter wind. The chicken coop revealed nothing unusual, just a basket of eggs abandoned in the straw. Melissa examined the snow around the small structure, noting small footprints leading away toward a grove of trees. "Has anyone followed these tracks?" she asked. "My sons did, but they disappeared where the ground grows rocky," Abraham explained. Melissa frowned, studying the direction. "Those trees, do they connect to the forest that borders the Harrington Ranch?" "Yes, the property line runs through them." A suspicion formed in Melissa's mind. "Mr. Cohen, is there any chance Ruth might have gone to the Harrington property?" "Why would she? The Harringtons have made it clear we are not welcome," but doubt crept into his voice. "Children don't always understand adult conflicts," Melissa said gently, "and Ruth may have had her own reasons." A new voice joined the conversation. It was David Cohen, the teenage son Melissa had seen at church. "She has been feeding a stray dog," he admitted reluctantly. "I saw her sneaking scraps to it." Maybe it went that way. With this new information, a search party was quickly organized among the Cohen family and their workers. Melissa insisted on joining, despite their concerns. "I know the Harringtons," she explained. "If Ruth has strayed onto their property, I may be able to help smooth any difficulties." They set out, following the faint tracks as best they could. The weather was deteriorating. Snow began to fall again, obscuring what little trail remained. Melissa found herself praying silently for the child's safety. She also wondered with guilt what Caleb would think of her, disregarding his instructions to remain safely in town. After nearly an hour of searching, they reached the edge of Harrington land. The boundary was marked by a crude fence and warning signs against trespassing. Just as they were debating whether to continue, Melissa heard something. "Listen," she urged. "That sounds like a child crying." David Cohen cupped his hands around his mouth. "Ruth! Ruth, can you hear us?" A faint reply came back, and the search party hurried forward, ignoring the property line. Following the sound, they approached a small ravine where melting and refreezing snow had created a treacherous slope. Peering over the edge, Melissa spotted Ruth Cohen huddled at the bottom, her red coat bright against the snow. Beside her lay a shaggy dog, its leg visibly injured. "Ruth, are you hurt?" Abraham called down. "Papa!" The child looked up, tears streaking her face. "I fell, and Rusty is hurt. He can't climb up." Relief washed over the search party, quickly followed by the practical problem of extracting the child from the ravine. The sides were too steep and icy for Ruth to climb unaided, and none of the adults could safely descend. "We need rope," Melissa decided, "and help." As if in answer to her unspoken wish, hoofbeats approached from the Harrington side of the property. Bradley Harrington himself appeared, accompanied by two ranch hands, all three men armed and suspicious. "Cohen! You're trespassing," Harrington called out, his hand resting near his holster. "My daughter fell," Abraham replied, gesturing to the ravine. "She followed her dog onto your land and got trapped down there." Harrington's stern expression faltered as he dismounted and approached the edge, looking down at the frightened child and injured dog. "Mr. Harrington, we need rope to get her out, and the dog is injured. It will need to be carried." For a tense moment, the rancher seemed to weigh his options between the long-standing feud and the needs of a child. Then something in his face softened. "Jackson," he called to one of his men, "fetch rope from my saddlebag. Peters, Ride back to the ranch for a blanket to carry that dog." As the men hurried to comply, Harrington turned to Abraham Cohen. "No child should suffer for adults' disagreements," he said gruffly. "Let's get your daughter out of there." What followed was an extraordinary act of teamwork between sworn enemies. Harrington's ranch hand descended into the ravine using the rope, then secured Ruth in a makeshift harness. Both shepherds and cattlemen, working side by side, quickly pulled Ruth to safety. The dog followed, whimpering as it was carefully lifted in a blanket sling. Ruth flew into her father's arms, sobbing with relief and cold. "I'm sorry, Papa." Rusty ran after a rabbit, and I just wanted to bring him back. "You're safe now, little one," Abraham soothed, wrapping her in his coat. "That's all that matters." Melissa knelt beside the dog, examining its injured leg. "I think it's just a sprain, not broken," she assessed. "With rest, he should recover." "You can splint it at our ranch," Harrington offered unexpectedly. "It's closer than your place, Cohen, and the child needs warming up." The offer hung in the air, weighted with years of animosity and the unprecedented opportunity to break it. Abraham Cohen looked from his daughter to his longtime enemy. "We accept your hospitality, Harrington." "Thank you." As the unlikely procession made its way toward the Harrington Ranch house, Melissa found herself walking beside Bradley Harrington, slightly behind the others. "That was a generous offer," she said quietly. Mr. Harrington's weather-beaten face remained stoic. "It wasn't right, letting a child suffer because of adult disputes. I've been thinking about that since your Christmas festival, Miss Hughes. Maybe there are better ways than the path we've been on." "There usually are," Melissa agreed, "if people are willing to look for them." At the Harrington Ranch, Ruth was bundled before the fire with hot chocolate, while the women of the household fussed over her like one of their own. The dog was tended to, its leg carefully splinted, and promised a place in the barn until it was fully healed. More remarkably, Bradley Harrington and Abraham Cohen sat across from each other at the same table, sharing coffee. They spoke in a halting manner that, while not friendly, lacked the previous hostility. "Perhaps," Cohen ventured cautiously, "there might be ways to divide the western grazing land that would serve both our needs." "Perhaps," Harrington allowed, studying his coffee cup. "Spring's still months away. There is time enough to consider possibilities." Melissa watched this tentative thaw with quiet satisfaction. A child's misadventure had accomplished what weeks of diplomatic efforts had failed to achieve, the beginning of actual dialogue between the faction leaders. As afternoon faded toward evening, Melissa realized with alarm how much time had passed. Caleb and his search party might have returned to find her gone, contrary to his explicit instructions. "I need to get back to town," she announced, rising from her chair. "Sheriff Reynolds will be concerned about my absence." "I'll have my men escort you," Harrington offered. "It's not safe with that outlaw still at large." The ride back to Timber Ridge was swift, with two of Harrington's most trusted hands flanking Melissa protectively. As they approached town, she noted with relief that there was no unusual activity. There was also no sign that Caleb had returned or that Jake Harmon had been found. After thanking her escorts, Melissa hurried to the jailhouse, where she unlocked the door. Inside, all remained as she had left it that morning, empty and quiet. She stoked the fire, made fresh coffee, and settled in to wait, her mind replaying the day's remarkable events. The Cohen child was safe, the dog would recover, and two men who had been bitter enemies had sat at the same table, considering possibilities for cooperation rather than conflict. It wasn't peace yet, but it was a beginning. Now, if only Caleb and his men would return safely, with or without the outlaw. Melissa found herself drawn to the window repeatedly, scanning the darkening street for any sign of the search party. When the jailhouse door finally opened hours later, she spun around eagerly, only to freeze at the sight of a stranger filling the doorway. A tall, rangy man with a week's growth of beard assessed her with dangerous interest. "Well, well," he drawled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "You must be the reason Reynolds has gone soft." "Mighty pretty reason, I'll grant him that." Melissa's blood ran cold as she realized she'd not only forgotten to lock the door, but the very man it was meant to keep out, Jake Harmon, was standing before her, obviously looking for Caleb. Melissa's mind raced as she fought to maintain outward composure. The outlaw before her held a revolver casually at his side, his stance relaxed but watchful. "Mr. Harmon, I presume," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sheriff Reynolds is expected back shortly with his deputies." Harmon's laugh held no humor. "Nice try, ma'am, but I've been watching this town. I know he's out searching the North Country with every man who can ride. He won't be back for hours yet." He gestured with his gun. "Why don't you sit down? We're going to wait for him together." Melissa complied, calculating her options. The town was quiet at this hour, most folks at home for the evening meal. Screaming would likely go unheard, and it might provoke Harmon to violence sooner rather than later. "What do you want?" she asked, buying time as she settled into the chair farthest from him. "Justice." Jake Harmon spat the word like a curse. "Reynolds tracked me for weeks 2 years back. He cost me everything. My freedom, my share of the Colorado bank job, and my reputation. The man needs to understand what it feels like to lose something valuable." The implication was clear. She was to be the instrument of Caleb's punishment. Melissa suppressed a shudder, focusing instead on keeping the outlaw talking. "You could have gone anywhere after escaping. Why come all this way for revenge?" Harmon settled himself against the edge of Caleb's desk, still keeping the gun trained in her general direction. "A man has his pride. Reynolds humiliated me, tracking me down when every other bounty hunter had given up. He made me look weak." His expression darkened. "Nobody makes Jake Harmon look weak and walks away." Melissa's gaze darted to the gun rack on the wall. It was empty, of course. Caleb had taken his rifle, and his deputies carried the others. There was a letter opener on the desk, but reaching it would be impossible without Harmon noticing. "I understand pride," she said carefully, "but surely your freedom is worth more than revenge. Every minute you spend here increases your risk of recapture. You're clever. I can see why Reynolds is sweet on you, but I've waited too long for this moment to walk away now." A new plan began forming in Melissa's mind. If she could keep him talking until Caleb returned, perhaps she could influence where that confrontation happened. The jailhouse, with its close quarters and limited exits, would put Caleb at a disadvantage. But if she could maneuver Harmon elsewhere— "It's getting colder in here," she observed, rubbing her arms. "The fire needs tending." Harmon glanced at the stove, where the embers were indeed dying down. "Go ahead." Melissa moved to the wood box and added several logs to the stove. As she worked, she continued conversationally. "I came to Timber Ridge as a mail-order bride, you know, for the previous sheriff, not Caleb, Sheriff Reynolds. Fate has a strange way of changing our plans." "Lady Fate's been mighty unkind to me lately," Harmon replied. "About time she turned her wheel in my favor." "Perhaps she already has," Melissa suggested, returning to her seat. "You escaped prison. You've evaded capture this long. Maybe that's all the favor you should expect." Harmon snorted. "My luck changes when Reynolds pays for what he did." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the jailhouse windows. Snow had begun falling again, thick flakes visible in the lamplight through the glass. Melissa glanced toward the window, then back at Jake Harmon. "They say a major storm is coming tonight," she remarked. "The search party might be forced to make camp rather than return in the dark." Frustration crossed Harmon's face. "Then we'll wait till morning if we have to." "Here? The whole night?" Melissa frowned thoughtfully. "People will come looking for me if I don't appear for evening church services." "Church services?" Harmon questioned. "On a Tuesday?" "There are plans for special evening prayers for the town's safety. Because of you, actually." The lie came smoothly. "It starts at 7. It's nearly that now." Doubt crept into Harmon's expression. "You're trying to trick me. Check the church yourself if you don't believe me," Melissa challenged. "You'll see the lights, hear the singing. But of course, a crowded church would be a risky place for a wanted man." Harmon moved to the window, keeping his gun trained on Melissa as he peered out toward the church at the end of the street. Sure enough, lights glowed in its windows. Reverend Phillips always worked late in his study on Tuesdays, a detail Melissa was counting on. "It seems you're telling the truth," he conceded, "but it changes nothing. We'll relocate if necessary." This was the opening Melissa had hoped for. The church has a back room, the Reverend's study. It would offer privacy, warmth, and a clear view of the street. You'd see the search party returning long before they saw you. Harmon considered this, temptation warring with suspicion in his expression. And why would you suggest that? It seems against your interests. Melissa pierced his gaze sternly. Because a church is a sacred place. Even men like you might hesitate before spilling blood on consecrated ground. You really are something, aren't you? Trying to appeal to my better nature? He chuckled. Darlin', men don't survive prison by clinging to moral qualms. Then consider practicality, Melissa pressed. A confrontation in the church offers you more escape routes than this jailhouse, and the Reverend keeps brandy in his study for medicinal purposes. The mention of alcohol tipped the scales. All right, we'll move to the church. But one false move, one cry for help, and I won't wait for Reynolds to settle scores. Understood. Perfectly, Melissa agreed, rising. Moments later, they were moving through the snowy darkness toward the church, Harmon's gun pressed against Melissa's back beneath her cloak. The streets were deserted, everyone seeking shelter from the worsening storm. Inside the church, warm light spilled from beneath the study door at the rear of the sanctuary. Harmon directed Melissa through the rows of pews, his footsteps unnervingly silent. Melissa knocked softly on the study door. Reverend Phillips? It's Melissa Hughes. The door opened to reveal the Reverend, a slight man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a gentle demeanor. His welcoming smile died as he registered Harmon behind her. Inside, Harmon ordered, shoving them both into the small study and closing the door behind them. Not a word, Reverend, if you value your life and hers. Reverend Phillips raised his hands, his expression remarkably composed. I take it you're Mr. Harmon. We've been praying for a peaceful resolution to your presence in our community. Harmon barked a laugh. Save your prayers, old man. I'm not here for salvation. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, the Reverend replied mildly, earning a glare from the outlaw. Sit down, both of you, Harmon commanded, gesturing toward chairs by the small fireplace. And where's that brandy I heard about? As the Reverend reluctantly produced a bottle from his desk drawer, Melissa caught his eye briefly, trying to convey that she had a plan. His slight nod indicated understanding, though what he thought she intended was unclear. The study offered a clear view of the main street through a small window. It was exactly as Melissa had described. What she hadn't mentioned was that the church bell rope hung just outside the study door, within potential reach if an opportunity arose. For nearly an hour, they sat in tense silence, broken only by Harmon's occasional comments as he nursed the brandy. The storm outside intensified, snow accumulating rapidly on the window ledge. Melissa began to wonder if Caleb and his party had indeed been forced to make camp somewhere, leaving her and the Reverend at Harmon's mercy until morning. Then, barely visible through the swirling snow, movement caught her attention on the street. At least 4 riders were approaching. Melissa carefully kept her expression neutral, but Harmon noticed the change in her posture. What is it? He demanded, moving to the window. His face hardened as he spotted the search party. Right on time. Your sheriff's back, though he's about to wish he'd stayed away. As Harmon watched the riders dismount at the jailhouse across the street, Melissa exchanged another glance with Reverend Phillips. They had only moments before Harmon would act. Mr. Harmon, the Reverend said quietly, whatever you plan to do, I urge you to reconsider. Violence only begets more violence. Spare me your sermons, Harmon snapped, checking his gun. Reynolds will realize his precious lady friend is missing soon enough. When he comes looking, I'll be waiting. And then what? Melissa asked, genuine curiosity in her tone. You shoot him, and then what happens to you? Every man in town will hunt you down. You'll never escape the territory alive. Doubt flickered briefly across Harmon's face before hardening into resolve. Some things matter more than survival. Harmon family honor is one of them. Is that truly what your family would want? The Reverend pressed gently. Your mother? Your father? Don't you dare speak of my family, Harmon snarled, momentarily distracted by genuine emotion. It was the opening Melissa needed. In one fluid motion, she seized the heavy iron poker from the fireplace stand and swung it with all her strength, striking Harmon's gun arm. The weapon discharged, the bullet embedding harmlessly in the ceiling, as Harmon howled in pain and rage. Reverend Phillips moved with surprising agility for a man of his years, throwing himself against Harmon and sending both men crashing into the desk. Melissa bolted for the door, flinging it open and lunging for the bell rope in the sanctuary. The church bell rang out into the snowy night. It was an unmistakable alarm that would summon help instantly. Inside the study, furniture crashed as Harmon fought to free himself from the Reverend's determined grasp. Melissa seized a heavy brass candlestick from the altar, prepared to defend herself as Harmon burst through the study doorway, his face contorted with fury. But before he could reach her, the church's main doors flew open, admitting a blast of cold air and snow. And Caleb, gun drawn and expression fierce. "Harmon!" he called sharply. "It's over. Drop your weapon." The outlaw froze, calculating his options as he stood trapped between them. For a brief moment, Melissa feared he would charge either her or Caleb in a suicidal final act. Then, with a look of pure hatred at Caleb, he lowered his gun to the floor. "I should have killed you when I had the chance, Reynolds," he spat. "I won't make that mistake twice." "You won't get another chance," Caleb replied evenly, moving to secure the fallen weapon. Behind him, his deputies entered, quickly taking charge of the subdued outlaw. As Harmon was led away in handcuffs, Caleb turned to Melissa, his professional composure cracking to reveal raw fear and relief. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Thanks to Reverend Phillips." She glanced toward the study where the clergyman was straightening his disheveled clothing, apparently unharmed. "The bell was quick thinking," Caleb commented, holstering his gun. "We just discovered you were missing from the jailhouse when we heard it." "I knew you'd understand what it meant," Melissa replied, "though I didn't know you'd returned already." "The storm forced us back earlier than planned." His expression darkened. "Melissa, you were supposed to stay safely locked in the jailhouse." "What happened?" Briefly, she recounted the day's events. Ruth Cohen's rescue, the unexpected thaw between Harrington and Cohen, her return to town, and Harmon's appearance at the jailhouse. "You deliberately lured him to the church?" Caleb asked incredulously when she finished. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" "More dangerous than waiting for him to ambush you in the jailhouse," she countered. "I did what seemed necessary at the time." They might have continued arguing if Reverend Phillips hadn't intervened. "Perhaps we could all use some calming tea," he suggested diplomatically. "It's been a trying evening for everyone." Later, warmed by tea and the study's fire, Melissa found herself alone with Caleb as the Reverend stepped out to speak with Mayor Simmons, who had arrived to assess the situation. "I was terrified when I found the jailhouse empty," Caleb admitted quietly. "Knowing Harmon was out there somewhere, and you were gone." He shook his head. "It was like Wyoming, all over again." "But it wasn't," Melissa pointed out gently. "This time, no one was hurt." "The danger has passed." "Thanks more to your quick thinking than my protection." His expression was troubled. "I promised to keep you safe, and instead you had to save yourself." "Caleb," Melissa reached for his hand. "We saved each other." "That's what partners do." "Partners?" The word seemed to surprise him. "Yes." Melissa now recognized that the time for half-truths and cautious steps had passed. "These past days have shown me that we work well together. Not just in crises, but in building something positive for this community. I came to Timber Ridge expecting one kind of partnership and found another. Unexpected, but perhaps more meaningful." Caleb's expression softened, the professional mask falling away completely. "I've been fighting this, whatever is growing between us, because of what happened before, afraid that caring for someone in this job would cloud my judgment, put them at risk. And now? Now I wonder if it's the opposite." His fingers tightened around hers. "Having someone to protect, to build with. Perhaps that makes a man more cautious and thoughtful about the consequences, not less." Outside, the storm continued to blanket Timber Ridge in white, but inside the Reverend's study, something warm and hopeful blossomed between them. Their journey wasn't over. Jake Harmon still needed to face justice. Community tensions will require ongoing attention. Their own relationship had barely begun to define itself, but as Caleb's hand held hers, strong and steady in the firelight, Melissa felt more certain of her place and purpose than she had since arriving on that snowy afternoon over a week ago. Timber Ridge was no longer just an unexpected detour in her life's journey. It was beginning to feel like home. The days following Harmon's capture brought a flurry of activity to Timber Ridge. The outlaw was secured in the very cell where Melissa had been staying, requiring new accommodations for her. Mrs. Simmons insisted that Melissa take their spare bedroom until more permanent arrangements could be made. It was an offer Melissa gratefully accepted, though she found herself missing the simple jailhouse and Caleb's steady presence nearby. The territorial marshal arrived on December 30th to transport Harmon to the capital for trial, accompanied by 2 deputies and an imposing prison wagon. Melissa watched from the milliner's shop window as Caleb formally transferred custody of his former quarry, and then the 2 lawmen exchanged documents. "Quite the excitement for our little town," Mrs. Peterson commented as she fitted Melissa for a new bonnet. It was a gift from several townsfolk in appreciation of her efforts in organizing the festival and bravery during the Harmon incident. First the festival, then the Cohen girls' rescue, now this. "You've brought more change to Timber Ridge in 10 days than we've seen in a year." "It's hardly my doing," Melissa demurred, though she couldn't deny the town felt different. It was energized in a way it hadn't been when she arrived. The tentative peace between Harrington and Cohen continued, with small but significant gestures from both sides. Yesterday, Bradley Harrington's wife had delivered a basket of beef cuts to the Cohen household. The reason was for Ruth's recovery, but it was clearly a peace offering. In return, Abraham Cohen had sent 2 of his finest wool blankets to the Harrington ranch. As Melissa left the milliner's with her new bonnet, which was a practical but flattering dark blue felt with a modest ribbon, she nearly collided with Caleb on the boardwalk. "Sheriff," she greeted him, suddenly formal in public despite their growing closeness. "I saw the marshal depart with Mr. Harmon." "Good riddance," Caleb replied, falling into step beside her. "Though I'll be writing depositions about this incident for days." They walked for a moment before he added, "I checked your former accommodations. The jail cells have never looked cleaner." Melissa laughed. "I may have scrubbed them thoroughly before departing. It seemed the least I could do after such unconventional hospitality." As they reached the mayor's house where she was staying, Caleb hesitated. "Melissa, I was wondering if you might join me for a walk later. There's something I'd like to discuss." The seriousness in his tone sent a flutter of anticipation through her. "Of course. After supper, perhaps?" "I'll call for you at 7, he confirmed, touching his hat brim before continuing on his rounds. The hours until evening passed with excruciating slowness. Melissa found herself changing outfits twice before settling on her forest green dress with the lace collar, the one Caleb had once commented on favorably. She arranged her hair with particular care, then chided herself for such vanity. Yet when he appeared promptly at 7, Melissa noted that Caleb had also taken pains with his appearance. His dark hair was freshly trimmed, his shirt pristine beneath a vest she hadn't seen before, and he had forgone his usual sheriff's coat for a more formal one. "You look lovely," he said simply as she joined him on the porch. "Thank you." "You're quite presentable yourself, Sheriff," she replied, accepting his offered arm. They walked through town toward the church square, now cleared of festival remnants but still beautiful with snow gleaming in the moonlight. A few evening strollers gave their greetings as they passed by. "I believe we're the subject of town speculation," she observed lightly. Caleb's expression was wry. "Small towns run on gossip. I've been asked my intentions at least 3 times today." "And what did you tell them?" Melissa asked, her tone teasing. "That my intentions were my own business," he replied. Then more softly, "And yours?" They reached the gazebo in the church square, a simple structure decorated with the last of the festival evergreens. Caleb guided her up the steps and into its sheltered interior, where a small lantern hung, clearly placed there earlier. "You planned this," Melissa realized, touched by the gesture. "I tried to," he admitted, "though I'm better at tracking outlaws than arranging romantic settings." "It's perfect," she assured him. "What did you want to discuss?" Caleb seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his usual confidence replaced by a hesitancy that endeared him to her all the more. Finally, he took both her hands in his. "Melissa, when you arrived in Timber Ridge, I saw you as an unexpected complication, Another responsibility in a temporary position I never sought. But these past days, he paused, searching for words. You've become important to me in ways I never thought of. Her heart swelled as she encouraged him with a gentle squeeze of her hands. And you to me, Caleb. I told you I don't stay in one place, he continued. I haven't since Wyoming. But I find myself wanting to stay here, in Timber Ridge, because of you. What about your concerns? About wearing the badge and about history repeating itself? She asked softly. My concerns are still there, he acknowledged, but they are different now. What happened with Harmon showed me something important. Having someone to care about doesn't make me weaker or less effective. It makes me stronger. If anything, it gives me even more reason to be cautious and make the right decisions. You make me better, Melissa. Stronger, more whole. Tears pricked down her cheeks at the simple truth in his words. I came here seeking security, a practical arrangement with a man I'd never met. Instead, I found something I wasn't looking for. Something real with you. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, Caleb said earnestly. I know you came expecting to be Sheriff Wilson's wife, that your plans were upended. However, I wanted to let you know that I've asked Mayor Simmons to make my position permanent. I'm staying in Timber Ridge, Melissa, and I'm hoping that you might consider staying too. Are you proposing, Sheriff Reynolds? She asked, her voice steady. His smile was both tender and determined. Not yet. That would be too soon, even for a woman who traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met. The gentle teasing lightened the moment. But I am asking for a chance, for time to court you properly, to see if what's growing between us might become something lasting. Melissa felt joy bubble up within her like a spring. I would like that very much, she replied, though I should warn you. I've already accepted an offer to teach at the town school starting next term. I won't be leaving Timber Ridge anytime soon. Surprise and delight transformed Caleb's expression. You're staying? You have already decided? Mayor Simmons offered the position yesterday. The current teacher is expecting her first child and wishes to retire. It seems we've both been making plans for the future. Then may I be the first to welcome you officially to Timber Ridge, Miss Hughes? Though I hope someday you might consider a change of name as well as occupation. The implied promise in his words warmed her more effectively than any fire could have. One step at a time, Sheriff. I believe you mentioned something about proper courting. Indeed I did. His gaze dropped to her lips briefly. Beginning with this, if I may. Melissa's answer was to rise on tiptoes and meet him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet in the moonlit gazebo. When they parted, Caleb's expression held such wonder and tenderness that Melissa knew with certainty she had found something far better than the practical arrangement she'd originally sought. Happy New Year, Melissa, he murmured, the town clock having just struck midnight without either of them noticing. Happy New Year, Caleb, she replied softly. I believe it's going to be a very good one. By Epiphany, January 6, 1886. Timber Ridge had transformed in more ways than one. The tentative peace between the cattle ranchers and shepherds had solidified into cautious cooperation, with Bradley Harrington and Abraham Cohen meeting regularly to discuss spring grazing arrangements. The town hummed with new energy and optimism, partially inspired by the obvious courtship between their sheriff and the newcomer, who had so quickly become an essential part of community life. Melissa settled into teaching preparations with enthusiasm, boarding temporarily with the Simmons family, while Caleb undertook renovations to the small house attached to the sheriff's office. They were improvements that didn't escape the town's notice or speculation. The Epiphany celebration at the church was a community affair that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Cattle and sheep families sat intermingled. Children played together regardless of background, and a spirit of genuine goodwill prevailed. After the service, Reverend Phillips called for the congregation's attention before they departed. Before we conclude our Epiphany observance, I have a special announcement, he declared, his kind face alight with pleasure. Sheriff Reynolds has asked me to officiate a wedding ceremony, and I have joyfully agreed. Murmurs rippled through the gathering as all eyes turned to Caleb and Melissa, seated together near the front. The wedding will take place immediately following this service, the Reverend continued, for any who wish to witness the union. Melissa's cheeks flushed as townspeople turned to her with delighted surprise. She and Caleb had carefully planned this small ceremony, wanting simplicity rather than spectacle. The Epiphany service had provided the perfect opportunity, with the community already gathered. As the congregation rearranged itself for the wedding, Melissa slipped away briefly to don the simple white dress Mrs. Peterson had helped her create. It was not an elaborate wedding gown, but a lovely practical garment that suited her perfectly. Rosie McKinney produced a small bouquet of evergreens and winter berries, tied with a blue ribbon that matched Melissa's new bonnet. When Melissa re-entered the church on Mayor Simmons' arm, he having volunteered to give her away, she found the simple sanctuary transformed by the faces of people who had become dear to her in so short a time. Mrs. Cohen sat beside Mrs. Harrington, both women smiling notwithstanding their previous enmity. Ruth Cohen, fully recovered from her adventure, beamed from her place beside her father. Even the shepherd's dog, its leg healing nicely, had been permitted inside for the occasion, lying contentedly at David Cohen's feet. But it was Caleb who commanded her attention. He stood tall and handsome before the altar, his expression one of wonder as she approached. In him, Melissa saw everything she had come west seeking and more. Security, yes, but also respect, partnership, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely of circumstances. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Phillips began as Melissa reached Caleb's side, "we are gathered here to witness the union of two people whose path to each other reminds us that God's plans often differ from our own, yet lead us exactly where we need to be." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When asked who would stand as witnesses, Bradley Harrington and Abraham Cohen stepped forward together. It was a symbolic gesture that spoke volumes about the healing their community had begun. "I, Caleb, take you, Melissa." Caleb's voice was strong and sure as he spoke his vows, his hands warm around hers. "Not as the bride intended for another, but as the woman intended for me. I promise to cherish the strength, wisdom, and compassion that brought light to this town and to me. I pledge my protection, my respect, and my enduring love, today and all the days to come." Melissa's voice trembled as she responded, "I, Melissa, take you, Caleb. Not as the husband I expected to find, but as the partner I needed to discover. I promise to stand beside you in all seasons, to share in your burdens and your joys, and to build a life of purpose together. I pledge my support, my understanding, and my deepest love, now and always." As Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Caleb's kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience, yet promising more when they were alone. The celebration spilled out into the snowy churchyard, where tables had mysteriously appeared laden with food and drink. The community had anticipated and prepared for this moment, despite the couple's attempts at a quiet ceremony. Amid the congratulations and well wishes, Melissa found herself momentarily beside Bradley Harrington and Abraham Cohen, the unlikely witnesses to their union. "Thank you both," she said sincerely. "Your gesture today means more than you know." "A new beginning deserves to be marked properly," Harrington replied, his gruff manner softened by the occasion. "What you and the sheriff have built between you gives hope for what the rest of us might build between our communities." "Besides," Cohen added, "my Ruth would never have forgiven me if I refused to stand for the teacher who helped save her." As the celebration continued around them, Caleb appeared at Melissa's side, his arm slipping naturally around her waist, as if they had been together for years rather than weeks. "Are you happy, Mrs. Reynolds?" he asked quietly, the name new and wonderful on his lips. "Yes," she assured him, leaning into his strength, "though I still find it remarkable. I came to Timber Ridge to marry a sheriff I'd never met, and ended up doing exactly that. Just not the sheriff I expected." Caleb's laugh was warm against her hair. Life has a way of giving us what we need rather than what we think we want. As snow began to fall gently on the celebrating townsfolk, Melissa couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. From a practical decision to become a mail-order bride, to finding authentic love in the most unexpected circumstances. Timber Ridge had transformed from a strange, unwelcoming place to a true home. The jail cell that had once symbolized her desperate situation had become part of a cherished story she would someday tell their children. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Melissa looked up at him, snow catching in her lashes. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best Christmas gifts are the ones we never thought to put on our lists." His answering kiss, witnessed by their newfound community family, was all the confirmation she needed. Their unexpected union was indeed the greatest gift either could have received, and it was the perfect beginning to the journey ahead. The end.